Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andy Taylor. I work for MasterCard. I'm in their global urban mobility group. And our sort of role within that organization is to provide subject matter expertise. Everything from public transport to working with Uber and Lyft to sort of using bike and car share, but also EV and EV charging and what that means to the consumer and what that means for their experience about how they embrace mobility. We have a goal that we want to sort of be able to deliver frictionless experiences. We want to be able to provide sort of sustainable experiences as well. So EV charging is one of the key things that we focus on in MasterCard. The first thing I sort of wanted to sort of mention is the customer experience. We talked about the sort of frictionless experience. And what we're seeing nowadays is a lot of people are sort of going back to first principles. It's what's in your wallet. Many years ago, it used to be cash that was kept in a purse or in a wallet, and you would use that and sort of pay as you go. And then there were different sort of methodologies for sort of payment that made it easier for the actual provider. So if you used public transport, you would have a smart card that you would tap and get onto the bus, or you would have a different account for any sort of different mobility provider you were using, which is fine. It's great for that provider. They know that they can manage your account, they can engage you as a customer. But I can't take my smart card that I use for public transport in London, and I can't even go up the road to Manchester, or to Birmingham, or to France, or to New York. I can't go anywhere and use that same funds on that card anywhere else. So that's why a lot of people now, a lot of different agencies and groups around the world are embracing open loop. It's going back to what you originally had in your wallet. It's having that sort of ease of just trusting what you're carrying with you. And now that's credit cards, it's debit cards. It's both physical cards that you sort of carry and also the digital cards that you've got on your phone as well. So it's about how you can just use that to simplify the whole process of paying for the experience. Because I've been using an EV car and I've used it over in Europe. And I think it was one of the speakers from Crev mentioned he'd done some engineering work over in Europe and looked at the platforms, and there were many different platforms. And I have to agree. And none of them were interoperable. So every time I wanted to sort of find a charger, I'm sort of committed to looking through and finding the next charger for this company. Or I'm looking to sort of download the app and use my data, and then I've got to go through and register and put my credit card in and go through all the details. And I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, last time I did it. I was living in America. I went to Europe to sort of travel around, and the experience was that I downloaded the app, I populated with all the information, I put my credit card in, MasterCard, so I put that in, and then it was a case of I tried to put my phone number in, and it wouldn't allow me to put it in because it was a US phone number. So now I'm stuck. Now I've got to sort of try and find the next charger technology. So how do we fix it? We think the sort of simple solution of MasterCard is to sort of introduce sort of contactless payments. And there's no reason why you can't have sort of the contactless payments there, so you can just sort of tap your card and get access to pay for the energy that you're going to be consuming, you're putting into the vehicle. There's no reason why you can't just sort of tap and get an authorization, charge your car, and then when you disconnect, it's going to charge you for what you've actually sort of consumed. There's technicalities associated with it, but that's what we've got technical teams for. And there's no reason that you have to sort of disconnect the consumer, the customer, from the experience that you want to provide. So if you are an energy provider, if you are providing the facilities, you can get them to register a credit card in slow time, and every time they tap that card, you'll get notification in your account, and you can incentivize them to do things. You can incentivize them to use the facilities at times when it's quieter. So you're optimizing, you're spreading that demand over the available capacity. And if somebody taps on and you haven't seen that credit card, you can just charge them as normal. You're not limiting utilization to your specific customers. You're opening it up to everybody. Much as they do with fuel stations nowadays. I know I can drive down the road, driving to any fuel station, tap my bank card, and away I go. I think one of the other things that we need to sort of be cognizant of as well is how we actually do this for people in different sort of regions. Where the great example with the electric route, going through so many different countries, perfect example. But how do we make sure that a user at one end in one country is able to use the facilities at the other end of the route as well in Panama? So that's why we have to look and we start considering all of the different schemes. MasterCard, Visa, Amex, Discover, whatever it is. But we also have to consider the domestic schemes as well to make sure that nobody is sort of excluded from the experience of just tapping and going with that sort of vehicle. I think when we start looking at the concept of this and what it means, it becomes quite complex in terms of the different products that you have as well. So I've made it sound quite easy so far, you just tap and go, but there are complexities associated with it. Have you tapped a credit card? Have you tapped a debit card? Have you tapped a prepaid debit card? Something that you've got from a convenience store and loaded with funds. All of that has an implication of how we and the banks process that information. And along with processing that information comes risks, financial risks. It's not big risks if we manage those at the front, if we start thinking about those early on and start making sure that we understand that if somebody's tapped a card and we can authorize that card, that we know it's got funds, that it's not been denied, we can give them access to the charger. We can let them charge the vehicle. We can charge them for the amount at the end of the day. The other thing we need to do, though, in some instances, is we need to make sure that that card is correct, that that card hasn't been stolen. That card does have funds associated with it. Now, that usually requires a connection to our sort of gateways and networks. We need to be able to make sure that the funds are there. But what in the instance where there's no communication coming from the device? The cell phones have gone out. It's a bad connection, thunderstorms, whatever. We can't connect to the back offices and stuff. We don't want to leave anybody stranded in the middle of nowhere with no access if they've got a valid credential. So what we need to do is look at what happens in those instances. How do we manage what we classify as first charge risk? How much do we allow somebody to add value to sort of take a charge and up to a certain amount? How do we sort of come up with that figure that's equitable to everybody? To the people who have issued the card, to the user, the provider of the solution, and how do we sort of make sure that everybody is left whole, that nobody's felt sort of, that they're not being taken care of in this whole sort of payment ecosystem. I think one of the other things we need to consider as well is how we can use open loop as an incentivization tool as well. So how can we make just sort of tapping your phone or tapping a card a simpler experience? This is where we start to link incentives. This is where we start to change people's behaviors through what they're using every day. If I'm going to a restaurant and I know there's a charger there, can I get a discount on my bill because I'm charging using their facilities? If I'm going to an entertainment center and I want to charge, can I get a commensurate discount there? If I'm charging so many times per week, can I get discounts on these sort of systems? If I'm charging at disparate times of the day, can I sort of get incentives there? That can all be built into how you just charge the system anyway. This doesn't necessarily need to have all of the customer experience associated with it. So it's very much a case of trying to create this open ecosystem. It's very much a case of trying to engage the customer and making it as simple and as frictionless for them as possible. Now, I've heard some figures off my colleagues about how much it costs to put in a fast charger and a semi-fast charger, and we all know that sort of EV charging is going to help this sort of sustainable mobility, but it's got to be commercially sustainable as well. I know BAC is doing fantastic work. We spoke with them yesterday, and the information they gave us was phenomenal. A real insight into the benefits that they're actually delivering for their customers and anybody who wants to go and use their charging facilities. But how long can they give it away for free? with more EV vehicles coming in, there has to be a tipping point when the infrastructure needs to be heavily invested in to make sure that people can have access to the charging facilities. So you are going to need to charge. You are going to need to have to make it simple. You may have to change some regulations about who can actually sort of sell electricity, but I think there's ways and means around that as well. I think at the end of the day, it's about having the conversation between all of us, between the banks, between the providers, between the technology providers, with the regulators, but more importantly with the customers. What is it the customer wants to be able to do? And I think that's critical to making sure that as EV charging gets bigger and bigger and becomes more prevalent within the driving community, that we have that conversation and we deliver for the customer, and that will help us grow. Thank you very much.